Happy Friday, Falcons. As we begin to move towards the fall semester, I know that there are a variety of conversations bubbling up among us. How are we going to combat the coronavirus? How's it going with the new Albemarle building and the programs therein? In this moment, the other item gripping our country are the conversations and protests surrounding race and equity. Students and employees, alumni, and other supporters, but I am primarily addressing the students today, I want to tell you in this moment that you matter. I have heard from many of you this summer regarding this issue, and I want to communicate to you very clearly that your life matters. If you are African American, it is important for you to know and hear that your Black life matters. All of it. For whether you are Black, Latino, of Asian descent, Native American, some other minority in this country, or a Caucasian, in the words of our founders, we believe that you are made in God's very image. It is important to say those things. It is important to say those things at a university. It is important to say those things at a university affiliated with the United Methodist Church, and especially on this day as you plan to return to campus. This summer, I had a long, hard discussion with an African American friend who has been a friend of mine since he was a professor of mine in seminary. The timing was not purposeful, but it was interesting. We encountered one another by chance during the heart of the time in which the country was initially reacting to the pandemic on the one hand and the unjust attack on the life of George Floyd on the other hand. This conversation came in the midst of other emerging stories about instances in which our African American and other minority friends were articulating that they have felt targeted, even targeted on college campuses, in classroom discussions, in residence hall discussions, and tragically, even during athletic contests. At first, this friend, who once taught me a course in graduate school, was having a casual conversation with me that is pretty typical these days. We talked about family, about how we wished that life could return to normal so that we could go out to eat together, gather for worship together, or just catch a college basketball game together. But after 30 minutes or so, the conversation steered itself toward the national and local discussions on race, on equity. And at one point, we debated about why it is that persons get so exercised about the fact that someone would say Black Lives Matter instead of All Lives Matter, or All Lives Matter instead of Black Lives Matter. The pivotal point in the conversation for me was when my friend looked at me in a very knowing and honest way. He's looked at me that time many ways before, sometimes as a professor teaching a naive young student a class. And he said, Scott, I read something interesting the other day, and the author, a Black man, noted that some of us are still feeling duped by being left out of the all when this country's founders said that all were created equally. So, when white folks today say all lives matter and refuse to say Black Lives Matter, I'm not angry. But I do wonder, am I included in the all this time around? It was a sobering moment, but these are discussions that are taking place in America now. These are the discussions that are taking place in Central North Carolina now. Pfeiffer University is no exception to this. In fact, I expect us to lead the way. Situated in a highly diverse region, and with nearly 3 out of 10 of her students identifying as African American, we know that Pfeiffer must continue to do more towards creating a more just world. While we are a community set apart for learning, it is increasingly apparent that we cannot rest comfortably as a community when our neighbors and some of our own students and employees need help, need to feel heard, need to be heard, and need to see action. It is also becoming becoming increasingly apparent that we need to move forward on these issues precisely because we are a community set apart for learning and for growth. Any growth in the development that occurs here academically does not occur in a vacuum. It occurs in context, in a particular time and place. In this case, you may be pursuing a degree at Pfeiffer in nursing or criminal justice or physician assistant studies or English or religion. But you will be a better nurse or police officer or attorney or teacher or PA or minister or servant to a nonprofit if you have hard, sometimes uncomfortable discussions now and take the opportunity to listen to and learn from all kinds of people. Hear them, know their struggles, know their fears. They will one day be your teachers or your students, your doctors or your patients. They will one day be your clients, or they will be someone else's clients. So I encourage you to listen to the other. Listen for understanding and not for a pause in the conversation wherein you can make a comment. I would remind you that from one perspective, we have been leading the way in this state for years when it comes to this issue. In January 1958, Pfeiffer University admitted Aline Noel, and she became the first African-American student at a historically white four-year institution in North Carolina. We have the hate mail in the president's office to prove it. And some of that even came from other university presidents who claimed that we were doing the most non-Christian thing an institution could do in the 1950s. We were in some ways at the forefront of the struggle for racial equity, while others were saying, slow down. We refused to wait. In recent weeks, when I have shared that story, I have also been informed that some students in the 1960s and 70s have felt that we stifled them and stifled the voices of protesters fighting for racial change on this campus, including the voices of our own students. We must acknowledge those stories too, and acknowledge that all of us and all of our institutions have a checkered past. We have taken steps forward, but we have also failed at times and taken steps backwards. This semester, however, we cannot and will not sit quietly in our residence halls and classrooms and offices if our black brothers and sisters desire conversations and actions that lead to our systems of power honoring the sacred dignity of their humanity. Nor will we stand idly by in the silos of the halls of academia while other members of our community are forced into a vast and empty chasm. It is up to us to use our position and power to help push the pendulum towards justice. In June, a racial equity task force was formed, and it has been in conversation about where we stand as an institution on diversity and inclusion, and about how we can make this a better Pfeiffer for everyone. Here are a few of the current initiatives as Pfeiffer works towards that goal. One, we are reviewing our college's mission statement and communication to ensure that our stated values support and foster a racially harmonious and thriving culture. Our fall faculty conference focused on and emphasized the university's commitment to racial equity, and we trained our faculty and staff to be sensitive to racial trauma. We are revising our grievance and complaint policies regarding racism so that mediation is replaced with restorative justice strategies so people of color feel safer on our campus. And we are committing to address racial equity awareness issues in our hiring processes to ensure that we recruit individuals who share our commitment to anti-racism and who mirror our community. We will review our institution's historical symbols to ensure that they embrace all of our Pfeiffer family, and in fact, that process has already begun. To our black students and other students of color, your life matters. Your black life matters. Your brown life matters. Pfeiffer both hears and understands you, and in one regard, as a white male who has earned some of his authority, but who also had a head start in life in other ways, I know that in some ways I will never fully comprehend your pain. But my colleagues and I are in this business in the first place because long ago we became interested in and committed to lifelong learning. And in this moment, nothing could be more important to learn about. So Pfeiffer is dedicated to making our community a safe environment for all of our students. And we will commit to allocating resources to assist minority populations within our student body. As a university, we are called to the communal pursuit of the truth. As a university related to the United Methodist Church, we are called to embody an ethic of love like Jesus, and to embody the courage and thoughtfulness of some of Jesus' most courageous followers. Martin Luther King Jr. comes to mind in this moment, and so does the life of one of his best friends, Congressman John Lewis, who died last month after living one of the most extraordinary lives we've seen in this country. We are called to help and create and embody what King called the beloved community, where everybody is somebody. Lewis himself bought into his friend's philosophy of somebodyness, so much so that he sat at restaurant counters labeled whites only while having cigarettes extinguished on the back of his neck. So much so that he knelt to pray in front of a police officer on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Montgomery in the 1960s on a march from Selma to Montgomery, and refused to press charges after the officer hit him in his exposed skull with a club. Lewis talked about overturning oppression with love, with nonviolence. But at the same time, his nonviolence and love were not passive traits. They were not a sign of weakness. Rather, they were his way of showing the American public the true horror and brutality that underlies racism and that results from it. And as Lewis put it in a speech in the 1960s, nonviolence did not necessarily mean that he thought anyone should be patient when searching for freedom. No, to paraphrase him, he said, "We get one life, just like you, so we cannot wait. We want to be free now." Friends, to quote our friend John Lewis, let's not wait. Let's pursue true freedom for everyone now. Let's listen to one another now. Let's advocate for each other now. I commend you for returning to campus in these days, in such a time wherein we are facing so many issues. On the one hand, I want to congratulate you for returning, and yet on the other, I ask, what better place to return to? A place where we can have discussions that are meaningful and powerful and life-changing in deep and thoughtful ways, where we can be led by a credentialed faculty that cares about us and are engaging these issues in cross-disciplinary ways. So welcome back. I look forward to listening to you, to learning from you, and doing life together. And as always, go Falcons.